As Democrats gear up for the 2026 midterms, the Democratic Party is in soul-searching mode. The 2024 loss caught many off guard with a platform centered on national politics that fell flat. A new report frames the winning formula for 2026, going back to the basics. It says Democrats need to focus on issues working-class voters can connect with. The authors of the report spoke with 22 Democrats who won races in Republican-leaning districts across the Midwest. They found many voters no longer recognize the party's platform and view it as disconnected. The authors of that new study, former Illinois Congresswoman Cheri Bustos and Monmouth College adjunct professor Robin Johnson, joined me this morning to talk about their findings. Good to see both of you. And good morning. Congresswoman Bustos, let me start with you. Obviously, Democrats lost control of the House, the Senate, the White House. How did you and Professor Johnson decide to connect to say we need to look into this and reverse the trend?
It's nothing new to either Robin or to me. We have been writing this report every 4 years since President Trump was at the top of the ticket. We did it post 2016, post 2020, and then now post 2024. And we have looked at this exact same thing. What do winning Democrats, and the key word there is winning, what have they done in either rural districts, in working class districts, or in Trump won districts? And we have profiled these winners. We don't focus on anybody who's lost. We have focused on these winners and what they have done that's different from Democrats who don't win, or for instance, Democrats in these completely blue districts that can get away with whatever they want to do. It's very different if you're in a swing district, and we wanted to highlight these winners and what they've done.
Well, and Professor Johnson, let me come to you, because the answers are not one size fit all. This is a qualitative study. It is words and advice given from all these people you talk about, as opposed to quantitative and number crunching. But one size doesn't fit all. So when you write, for example, about Jeff Smith, a state senator from rural Wisconsin who put a sign on his red pickup truck and pulled to the side of the road and told people to come and talk to him, that's not going to work on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. So how do we make some of these fits apply to various people around the country and around the state?
That's why the focus on winning, I think, was the right way to go about this, because what winning involves in a working class district in the suburbs of Chicago will differ from what it may involve in rural Wisconsin. And that's why we turned it over to these folks to talk in their own words about what worked for them. The hope is that people can see this and others can learn to adapt some of the lessons of our report to their own particular areas. We don't pretend that one size fits all. In fact, each district is different in its own dynamics. And but we did learn some lessons that in general can be applied generally to other candidates that are looking for ways to win these tough districts that have a lot of working class voters, which the Democrats have been losing lately.
And we're going to talk about some of those specific people in just a moment. But Cheri, let me come back to you for a moment. I read the whole report. If there's an overall theme that struck me, it's that Democrats have no clear message, no clear national message. They're really not tough in the way they relate it. And their message seems to resonate with the party, but not with voters. A fair enough conclusion?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But, what Democrats who win, especially in these swing districts, what they do is, first of all, they're the right fit for those districts. That's really important when we're talking about from a party perspective and candidates that we recruit to run. So that, number one, they fit the district. Number two, they do really different interacting with voters. They don't make an assumption that the voters in their districts are going to be pro-choice. They don't make an assumption that they're going to be pro anything that the party's pro on. They go out and they ask those questions. They ask open-ended questions. One of the guys profiled in this is out of Iowa, and he's in a wheelchair. And think about this: if you would not vote for this guy, he literally parked his wheelchair at the bottom of these steps. He climbed up the steps to knock on a door and ask for a prospective voter's vote. And I'm just, if you're answering that door and somebody's asking you for your vote, I think when you see that they've worked that hard to ask for your vote, you're going to give them your vote. So it's stories like that and what these candidates go through to earn the voters' support, and I look at it as earning their support, not something that they think, okay, we're in a completely blue district and I'm just going to get that vote because I'm a Democrat.
Let me take a look at some specific. You both may want to chime in on this one, but Robin, let me come to you. I want to talk about Zohran Mamdani for a moment, of course, who won the Democratic primary for mayor of New York. I know it's New York, it's not Chicago, but at the same time, it surprised a lot of people. When you look at these qualitative individuals, I mean, it's hard to look at him and say, let's take his strategy and apply it across the way. Is he a one-off, or did he send you a message of a trend that may be happening around the country? By the way, he's a social democrat. Socialist Democrat.
That's New York City, obviously a lot of different. I think with his platform, I don't think that would sell very well up in Jeff Smith's district or in some of these other districts that have, again, large numbers of working class voters. I guess what we're saying out of this report is the importance is winning. And if Democrats don't see this during the Trump era, well, then they're going to be in minority status for quite a while. If somebody needs to be more middle of the road, pro-gun, pro-police, pro-life even, in some of these more moderate districts, then the party should celebrate that just as much as the candidate for mayor of New York City. It's got to be a big tent. And right now, in some ways, the Democratic Party is.
Sherry, let me ask you about some of the races here in Illinois, or the representatives here in Illinois. You talked to Eric Sorensen, who actually holds the seat you used to hold in the 17th district, Nikki Budzinski. They seem to be saying, don't talk so much about Trump. They've got a lot of Trump voters, but you need to focus in on values more so than politics. I want you to address that, but at the same time, we also have rural, very Trump districts here represented by, say, Mary Miller or Mike Bost. Do you even look at those kinds of districts and say, yeah, we can get those? Or do you say some of these you got to write off if you're a Democrat?
Well, I would say that the Mary Miller district and the Mike Bost district, both of which are in Southern Illinois, I think those are lost. They are. Every congressional district in America has what we call a Democratic Performance Index. For short, it's DPI. And that is how much does a district lean Democratic or does it lean Republican? Those are so far leaning Republican in Southern Illinois that I think we write those off. Not that long ago, we had Democrats in those seats. We had Bill Enyart, who was elected in 2012, the same year that I was elected to Congress, who won that seat. And then he was in one term and then lost it, and we're not going to get that back. Before that, it was Jerry Costello who held it for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And people like Bill Enyart and Jerry Costello, and for that matter, what we're looking at right now, Nikki Budzinski and Eric Sorensen, they're different kind of Democrats than what you have in the very far left-leaning blue districts that we have in some of the parts of Illinois. What makes them different? Well, to my earlier point, they fit those districts. They have lived in that part of the state for a long time. Their views are moderate Democratic views that fit the views of the voter. So it's all of that you've got to start with that recruitment when we're looking at these open seats. Do they fit the district? And if their views are far outside of the norms of the voters, that's not going to fly. A guy like Mamdani, who's a Democratic socialist, would not win in a district like Nikki Budzinski represents. But here's one observation, Paul. What Mamdani did to win that race is not a whole lot different than what these folks do to win their races. The difference is they're not in the biggest media market in the nation that's getting all this attention. And number two, they don't have a camera following them around for everything they do.
Yeah, Robin,
but they are doing the same types of campaigning.
Let me just, less than 30 seconds to go, Robin, my final question to you, which is with the passage of the budget bill, generally speaking, the stuff that Democrats say will hurt Democrats doesn't happen until after the 26, or hurt everybody, happen until the 26 midterms are over, and all that good stuff you're getting, like no tax on tips, that doesn't come into play until after the 28 election. What recommendation do you have for Democrats when some of the pain, so to speak, won't happen until after elections in 2026?
I think you've got to point it out, though, that it's very likely it will happen. Out here, rural areas where I live, there's a real threat to hospitals, which are already operating on the margins to some degree. I think rural hospitals, I think the cuts in Medicaid, I think some of the other cuts in student loan programs are going to be felt. I'm hearing student loan program cuts are already being felt by people.
And we're going to see how the Democrats sell that. So much more to talk about, and I'm so sorry to have to cut you off, but we're out of time. Let me thank both of you, Cheri Bustos, Professor Robin Johnson. Good to see you as always. Have a great Sunday. See you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
All right, one more break, and we're back with more WGN Political Report in a moment. Stay with us.